Welcome to our live podcast recording of Food for Thought. This is the first one of its kind and hopefully one of many. And we started this conversation with Dr. Karan Rajan today discussing probiotics and what the key differences are between buying probiotics in pill form from, a health food store or a pharmacy versus getting probiotic strains naturally from our diets. Now, this conversation is live, so you will hear audience participation as well, which made it extra special that day. Now, Dr. Karan has made it his mission to bypass pseudoscience. So right up our street, our Food for Thought listeners, I know you'll love this. And health misinformation that spreads across social media at the moment is rife. So what the actual science is about our bodies, that's what we're discussing today. He's an NHS general surgeon by day. He's also a clinical lecturer at the University of Sunderland, and he hosts his own podcast, Dr. Karan Explores. He is also one of the biggest health and science creators on social media. And on top of all of that, just, put another thing in there, he's a Sunday Times best-selling author of This Book May Save Your Life. I was buzzing that he said yes to this live recording. It's not an easy task having a huge audience in front of you and recording an incredible factual episode like this. So a huge thank you to Fern Cotton. You are such a babe. Thank you so much for having me and letting me host this at your Happy Place Festival this year. It honestly meant so much. And if you don't know, Fern also wrote a foreword for my book, The Science of Plant-Based Nutrition. So let's crack on, everyone. I hope you enjoy this live recording and this live episode. So back to probiotics.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to a supermarket, for legal purposes, let's say you go to Spolland and Schmarret, and you buy some probiotics.
So it took me a while. That was a bit slow. That was great. Yes.
If you buy some probiotics from there, chances are it doesn't work, or the bacterial strains it claims to have are dead. But if you have, for example, some Greek yogurt, which has live cultures inside it, there's a chance that the bacteria inside that will also die once it's exposed to your stomach acids. But with actual foods which contain probiotics, you get other advantages as well. Like with yogurt, you get protein hits. With fermented vegetables, you get fiber, antioxidants. So you get other benefits from food apart from just the claim, the false promise of probiotics, as in the supplements.
Absolutely. And there's a few brands out there that have done studies, but a lot of them don't do any research, do they? And they just release something and it's there on the shop shelves.
Yeah, it's in the UK certainly, and in the US as well. These probiotic supplements are not regulated as medicines. They don't have to go through the MHRA testing or be tested as a drug. So they can just be a food supplement and be sold without regulation. They don't have to have the bacterial strains they claim to. They don't have the number of units, the colony-forming units. And it's basically just expensive poo and pee.
Yeah, bit worrying there. And of course, for anybody out there, there are some for certain strains, like we said, but generically speaking, you have to be really savvy. And I think you just have to read everything now these days and have a look where a company gets their product from, who's working with that company, really try and get savvy because the regulation is just not there. Now, that moves me on to bloating, farting, all sorts of things. And I want to know as a doctor, day in, day out, because that's what you do. What percentage of people visiting you, but obviously we all fart, that's not what I meant. Obviously it's what you do
every day.
It's what he does.
It's all I do as a doctor. That's why the NHS waiting lists are through the roof.
It's what he does every day.
Yeah.
No, I was going to ask you, why is it so common? We've all got digestive complaints, and how common it is to actually fart past wind.
Yeah, I mean, women don't fart. Okay, so
Never.
First we have to just, confirm that, right? So everyone relax. So farting, it's a combination of things. So there's a component of the fart or gas, which is on the inside, which is from the food that we eat, from the water and liquids that we drink, from the air that we'll swallow when we're talking, when we're eating other foods. That's one component of fart. Another component is the fermentation of food products from the bacteria in the large intestine and the colon. So a combination of all of those things provides that gas inside, and it's got to go out one of two ways. Actually, there's a third way. Well, the gases can be absorbed into your bloodstream as well. But yeah, one way which it will come out would be the exit pipe, and yeah, you all fart. I lied. Women do fart.
Isn't it something like 15 to 20 times a day on average?
Yeah, it varies depending, if you're a man, woman, exercise, etc. But yeah, 12 to 14, something like that. So, why don't you, in the next 24 hours, just count how many times you fart to see if you're an average farter, a below average, or an above, or super farter even,
Yeah, let's keep a tally, everybody. Report to me afterwards. Send me a DM.
We don't have to start right now. Please.
Right. Let's talk about some claims that I think the answer to this is going to help you all decipher the wild west right now, that is the crazy world of nutrition wellness on the internet. Boosting your immune system. Now, to a lot of people, that might sound positive, but actually, could you break it down to why we actually don't want to be doing this?
Yeah, I think it's a very reductionist view to see the immune system as some sort of Google storage drive where you can increase the storage capacity by doing something to it, by paying $2.99 extra a month, and you get more immune system. But in actual fact, it's tightly regulated. So an overactive immune system leads to autoimmune disease where your body destroys itself. So I think we can optimize our immune system. And what I mean by that is make sure it's not below its optimal capacity. So for example, just one night of poor sleep can lower the number of natural killer cells, a type of white cell, which fights viruses and bacteria and tumor cells. That drops by 40% with one night of bad sleep. So we can optimize things in our life to just keep our immune system at an even keel rather than looking to boost it, because you don't want that.
And a lot of companies, before they get found out and then they have to reformulate their product, you do see these sorts of claims on packets everywhere. So you can report them.
Yeah, I think labeling is one of the things which a lot of these food companies, supplement companies have to be careful with. And I think that's an easy telltale sign of if a product is a grifty product or a dodgy product. If they're making outlandish, far-fetched claims and talking about balancing hormones and all sorts of various things like that, I mean, that's an easy red flag.
It's a big red flag. Let's actually go into balancing hormones, because I think to a lot of us, it might sound like something nice that we want to do, perhaps particularly for women. We go through menstruation and then we're dealing with hormonal fluctuations and menopause. We go through the mill. Balancing hormones, what does that even really mean?
It's a good question, Rhiannon. Very good question. Homeostasis is the balance of physiology in the body. The liver can detoxify things. You don't need something to detoxify. Your kidneys filter out any toxins. Your intestine, it also filters out any of the waste and gets rid of it. So your body is doing the balancing for you as long as you do the boring basics. You're moving, you're sleeping, you're eating food, etc. And seeing something external, extrinsic, trying to balance it for you is something you don't want. So if I'm working in the hospital and there's something external balancing something for a patient, that patient is probably in the intensive care unit where they're hooked up to a machine that's balancing their hormones for them. And you don't want to be in that position. So balancing hormones is an outrageous fallacy.
And I think this is another big red flag. So for all of you to decipher who you go to for your information, who to trust, there's some key statements: boosting immune system, balancing hormones. Does this person actually know what they're talking about? And if they're using this throwaway statement quite colloquially, they're not actually explaining what they mean, that's a huge red flag for you. I would love to also go on to the fact that we're living in a population that's ever rising in terms of weight. It's an emotive topic. I think we should start by saying food affects us all. We all have to eat 3 times a day. We all have emotional connection to it that spans through our entire lifespan, from when we're a child all the way up to when we're an adult. It makes us feel, it makes us think about things. So when you get patients going to you, Karan, with a BMI distinction, and they're panicked, they're saying, look, I'm now hitting this number. Does this mean it's this is it for me? What on earth does BMI mean? Is it an accurate measure? Because I don't think it's great.
No, I think there's a lot of things wrong about BMI and how it's used in the UK, certainly, and probably in most healthcare institutions across the world. And simply, it's just a number. And the number is useful on a population basis. So for epidemiological studies, if we're looking at, hundreds of thousands of people, to have an idea about the health of a population, BMI might be useful to look at trends. But if you're looking at an individual patient, BMI can be influenced by your age, your muscle mass, varies other your ethnicity as well. So, for example, Caucasian populations can have, on average, a lower BMI than South Asian populations, and that completely changes the risk profile of diseases. So I think looking at the BMI for an individual patient can be harmful, because in this country, we've got certain BMI cutoffs for surgery, for IVF treatment, etc., which can have huge ramifications on a patient's life. If a woman regularly goes to the gym and has a higher percentage of muscle mass than the average woman, and she's in a higher BMI category, and still in a healthy weight range and she's a healthy person, she might be denied IVF treatment based on that BMI cutoff, which seems unfair, and it doesn't seem logical to base all health metrics on one number.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it almost, when you look at numbers in general, in this country, we've been through calorie counting being seen as the gospel way to even look at our food. And then in the medical system, we're seen as a number here. I understand the need to quantify, and I understand that we have to somehow have a criteria. There has to be a cutoff. But doctors understanding the nuance, and of course, nutrition professionals like myself, it's so important. So where do you sit, Karan, with conversations surrounding Ozempic or Wegovy, these injections and things that seem to be here to stay?
So I think if you take a macroscopic view of things and you zoom out and you look at what the current treatments for patients, bariatric patients, so patients who need some sort of weight loss management plan or treatment plan, in severe cases, they might need bariatric surgery. So weight loss surgery, essentially rearranging their internal plumbing, which is a major thing to do. And it's been proven in clinical trials to reverse type 2 diabetes and various other metabolic diseases. Ozempic can offer the same thing as the weight loss surgery, but far less invasive without a surgeon getting involved. So for a select cohort of patients, Ozempic can be a game changer, and it's more cost effective, lower complication risk, etc. But there are too many people using Ozempic as a quick fix, as a short-term tool. And we know, based on the studies, it can't be used as a short-term tool. Because if you look at the trials that have been done on Ozempic, after the Ozempic is stopped, the injection is stopped, most people regain over 2/3 of the weight lost. So it doesn't make sense as a short-term tool, and the risk-benefit ratio also doesn't make sense, especially if you've not tried the other lifestyle and behavior changes first.
So why then? So also there's a big area of the black market when we're talking about Ozempic as well. I have a clinic and we see it all the time with people that are actually a healthy weight or classified not within that cutoff are paying for this drug. Is there also a problem because there's no regulation to seem to stop it spreading in this way? The people that really need it, are they getting it?
It's the same problem that people face with things like these, the CGM devices which measure your blood glucose that are made for diabetics, or for diabetic drugs like metformin. The anti-aging wellness bros are also using it. It's needed by diabetics. And we can see the same problem happening with Ozempic and shortages of Ozempic for diabetics or those with metabolic disorders not having access because someone wants to get a six-pack before their wedding. So I think, yes, there's a degree of the private healthcare institution enabling people to get access to these drugs. Ultimately, these are very powerful drugs. I've seen people in the hospital being admitted with complications from these drugs when actually they didn't need to be on it in the first place.
And the side effects long term. So I'd love everybody just to really think carefully. If you know somebody or it's something you're considering, just to know all of your options, because the side effects are no joke from what I've read.
Yeah, as a potent drug which manipulates your gut hormones and brain hormones as well, there are kind of standard side effects, including nausea, diarrhea, abdominal pain, but also some serious side effects which have a high mortality index associated with them. For example, a patient I saw a couple of years ago taking it for a six-pack before his wedding had pancreatitis, an inflammation of his pancreas. And acute pancreatitis, severe pancreatitis, has a 1% mortality rate, 1% death rate, which is nothing, to be laughed at. So you need to be aware of these.
It's really important, and something I know if anybody's following, myself or Karan online, you will see that we're constantly trying to fight back against misinformation. We're constantly trying to put out a nice balanced message, but it's very difficult because there's some camps on the internet that obviously are very opinionated and they want to make money from everybody. So of course they're going to do what they can to sell. I would love to know, what somebody, this is on a complete side note, and then I'll get into the other topics in a second, like yourself, is thinking about when you're operating on somebody in a theatre. You know, I've had surgeons before as my nutrition clients, and I've looked at how they can fuel themselves. What goes through your head? Because you can be in a surgery room, you can be in the theatre for hours.
What happens in the operating room?
Oh,
no. So when you're operating and when you've got, when you're, sorry to be graphic, at 1 p.m., if your hands deep in someone's guts, get your mind out of the gutter, guys. You're in autopilot mode for a certain number of things. So if I'm used to doing something that's kind of just on autopilot and I don't need to focus on that one thing because I've done it, 1,000 times. But if there's a specific thing that I have to focus on, then my focus will be purely on that. But otherwise, when you're in the operating room with someone, it's a team sport, it's a team game. You need to be talking to the other people. And yeah, sometimes, and unashamedly, sometimes it is a lot of hospital gossip. That's what we talk about.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
But you do very important work. So not to dumb down the fact that, we need our NHS, we need our surgeons. It's incredible. Do you have a kind of ritual, like a fuel-up ritual that I think we could all take away? Because if we've got to do something that requires some deep concentration for a prolonged period of time, with my clients, I put a plan in place. Do you have a set thing that you do, a set diet that you eat?
So often I'm operating for long hours in one go, 6 hours in one go or 8 hours in one go. And obviously you can't take regular breaks during that period of time to go away and refresh yourself. You have to be aware to fuel yourself before. So for me, it's not going to be quick sources of fuel that's just going to leave me crashing and hungry and tired and thinking about my gut 4 hours into surgery. So something in the morning that's just going to just have me really full. So something that is high in protein and high in fiber, because both these macronutrients, protein and fiber, are some of the most satiating things that you can have, and something that I can just have in the morning, and then I'm probably done until I finish surgery sometime in the early evening. So something like overnight oats. And the thing about overnight oats, which I love, is that not only does it taste great, and you can customize it to whatever you want or your palate, but protein, fiber, and resistant starch as well, because the oats that you've got, you've cooked them, you've cooled them, and actually it acts as like a pseudo fiber. So, and it just fills you up the whole day, and it's good for your gut health as well.
Absolutely. Top tip. So if you want to let your carbohydrates cool down and then you reheat them to eat them again, or you're just using them once they've cooled down and then you're eating them, you're creating that incredible strain, which is really good for our gut bugs. So to help our gut health, that's exactly the type of breakfast that we need to be having. Now, I found this particularly interesting. YouTube has recently added a feature to label certified healthcare professionals to combat online misinformation. To give you an idea, and I spoke about this in the Nutrition Hub earlier, there's a study that came out last week that said less than 2% of information on TikTok is accurate when it comes to nutrition and health. Less than 2%. What do you think about this new feature from YouTube? Is it a step in the right direction? And how do they even put the criteria up for who is going to be that certified health professional?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction, certainly, to at least signpost people to reputed professionals. And it's a small blue box that appears under someone's channel saying, so-and-so is a licensed healthcare physician in the UK, and you need to upload proof of your GMC license or whatever. And whilst that is one step in the right direction, that doesn't mean necessarily that just because you're a doctor, you are an accurate source of information. There are plenty of doctors, nutritionists, and physios or whatever online who are not immune from misinformation. So I think while that's a positive step, it doesn't eliminate all risk of misinformation.
Absolutely. No, it's an absolute Wild West online. And I would love to just go into glucose monitors a little bit, because we did say earlier, we did touch on it. It's very, very popular, and I can see the positives and I can see the negatives to these types of things. So in terms of everybody needs to be wearing one, I don't know, what would you say?
So the glucose monitors, the continuous glucose monitors, and you've probably seen people wearing these little white circular patches on their back of their arms. They're built for diabetics to monitor their blood glucose spikes and troughs. And for diabetics, if they get continuous or chronic elevated blood sugar that can affect their kidneys, their nerves, and beyond, and basically cause immunosuppression. It's not good for diabetics to be, exposed to high levels of glucose for a prolonged period of time. But for normal people, if I ate an apple, my blood glucose would go up, my pancreas would produce insulin, and it brings the glucose levels back down to normal. And I think people need to realize we need glucose to be at higher levels to function, to have higher cognitive function, to focus, to concentrate, to feel good sometimes, to exercise. So we need that. So if we were monitoring our glucose obsessively, we could actually be so fixated on that singular number, we try to artificially blunt it. And how people can artificially blunt their glucose is by consuming a higher proportion of fatty foods, which can then derange your blood lipid profile. Anecdotally, I've seen a lot more patients present with gallstones who are wearing these CGMs, and I asked them, why are you wearing that? Are you diabetic? Your online history doesn't say you've got any history of diabetes. And they said, no, I'm just tracking my glucose. And then on further digging into their history, they're eating more fatty foods to blunt their glucose spikes.
And this is the worry with, I, personally, by the way, just so everyone knows, I've seen the positive impact of them and the negative as well within the Nutrition Clinic. There's always two sides to the coin, but it does demonstrate the fact that without supervision from a registered nutritionist or dietitian, if you're changing your diet and using one of these wearable devices and you haven't got the support to match your unique requirements, you can end up going the other way and making something even worse, technically. I think it can also instill unhealthy relationships with food. That's something we see a lot, and I think a lot of people that perhaps have calorie counted in their time, or now they're looking at their monitor. So there's that side to just have a little bit in the background of your mind of a little bit of a red flag, because diet is often overlooked. Why on earth, and this is something I'm going to get a bit passionate about, so I'm going to try very hard to keep it down, but there's a huge lack of nutrition education in this country in general. It should start in the early years in schools, and it should be there all the way throughout. And I'm going to ask every single person here eventually to help me fight this, because we're going to do something about this. We're going to try and change the curriculum this winter. That's one of my goals. But what can be done in terms of the medical professions looking towards diet and lifestyle interventions before they prescribe?
Yeah, I think really that's such a multifaceted problem, because the problem that doctors face on a daily basis and patients at the receiving end of this is a lack of time.
Yeah.
And with a lack of time, these other lifestyle or preventative factors often get put on the back burner. So, for example, someone comes to me in clinic with a bowel issue. The focus in the 10, 15 minutes I have would be on dealing with the bowel issue. But actually, would I get more bang for my buck and the patient benefit more from dealing with the underlying factors causing the bowel issues to prevent them coming and seeing me ever again? And I think this is the role of things like social media. So a lot of people, I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up here, but a lot of people suffer with hemorrhoids. And many people are sitting on the hemorrhoids right now. And how can we reduce the burden of hemorrhoids?
Yeah.
That often is starting with dietary changes, eating more fiber, your sort of bowel routine, your habits. So we can fix those things and those behavior and lifestyle choices early. We actually end up on a national epidemiological level, reducing the burden of lots of these lifestyle diseases. Hemorrhoids is one example. Diabetes, other metabolic diseases, hypertension, loads of things. And it starts with education.
Yeah, it does. And before I take questions, I'm going to try and take, so I did ask online in advance, 2 from here and a few from the audience. Could be anything, anyone that's brave enough. I don't know if we have a roaming microphone actually to pass around, but why do women orgasm less than men? Let's start with that one. That's one that was on there. Let's ask that question, and then I'm going to take a question from the audience.
Very cheeky, Rhiannon. Very cheeky. So I think, a lot of people might not be aware, but, the orgasm gap, one of many gaps in the sort of, gender health gap, pain gap, pay gap, etc. And, I actually spoke to a sex therapist on my podcast about a year ago, and they said it's because, men orgasm, and then they don't feel the need to satisfy their partner on average. So obviously, being a man, the anatomy is quite simple. It's one direct path from, the genitalia straight to the brain, and then that results, the pudendal nerve orgasm. In women, there are several routes to orgasm. Anatomically, there's vaginal, clitoral, cervical orgasms, and other erogenous zones as well. So actually, it's a bit more complex than us simple men, where there's one route. And actually, I think it's been stereotyped in Hollywood and online that the route to orgasm is penetrative sex, so vaginal orgasm, film. Right? But, actually, I think a very small cohort of women have orgasm via purely penetrative sex or vaginal orgasm. It's more clitoral. So I think there's a lack of understanding, probably due to stereotyping.
And it's taboo. Like, I think some people get embarrassed. It's a question that probably you weren't expecting to come to Happy Place, sit here and hear that kind of information. But, I think it's quite important that we speak about things and we're open. Does anybody want to ask Karan a question in the audience? It could be, we have got lots of people that want to ask questions. Okay. Do we have a roaming microphone that we can pass round? We do. We've got one coming over. So I'll take one from the lady here first in a moment.
Rhiannon,
I didn't tell you I was going to do that.
I'd just like to add as well, probably it's because of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychology, he said that the vaginal orgasms was a sign of a mature woman and clitoral orgasms was a sign of an immature woman.
Really?
So it's further stereotyping from a medical field.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Gosh, I did not know that. Here we go. What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Maddie, and thank you. This is really interesting. I had a question about IBS. I wondered why so many people have IBS and why it's rising.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Yeah, so the thing with IBS is we don't have excellent tests, diagnostic tests to exclude or include a diagnosis of IBS. And sometimes the symptoms are pretty vague and there can be a constellation of symptoms. It's often misdiagnosed as something else or something else is misdiagnosed as IBS. And I've seen this a lot of the times. I've seen patients with IBS or with another condition like gallstones misdiagnosed with IBS. Endometriosis, misdiagnosed as IBS, sometimes even bowel cancer diagnosed as IBS. Because, if you think about some of the symptoms, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, cramps, etc., a number of conditions can have that. So one reason for the rising number is probably misdiagnoses. But IBS, no one really knows the true cause. So is diet a factor in the incidence of IBS? Potentially. Is the microbiome a factor at play in IBS? And is our microbiome changing on a population level as the generations go on? Probably. And we don't have the answers. And that is science. It's always maybes, ifs, buts, could be's, and we don't know. But yeah, there is probably an incidence of rising IBS.
And I think a lot of the time people then think the food is to blame. And that's what we then see in the Nutrition Clinic. And most of the time it's actually lifestyle or it's stress that's inducing the response they're having when they consume the food, rather than it being the food itself. And then you have the dangerous trap of people excluding things from their diets they don't need to, because that wasn't the root cause of the irritable bowel syndrome in the first place. So IBS is definitely on the rise. Perhaps our lifestyles are just not conducive to sitting and eating mindfully. There's so many factors, and I think that's a fantastic question, and thank you. There's one more just over here. Thank you. I didn't give the team a heads up we were taking them from the audience. I just thought, why not?
Hi, I'm Vashali. Thank you. This is super helpful. I just have a quick question on the point of glucose spikes, because you're hearing so much online about plant-based milks and don't have coffee first thing in the morning, or don't have oat milk. If you're going to have almond milk, make sure it's unsweetened. And it can get really overwhelming walking into a coffee shop first thing in the morning before work thinking, should I be having coffee on an empty stomach? If I'm having coffee, which milk should I go for? Is there a rule of thumb? How should we be thinking about this? Because there's just so many different opinions online.
Absolutely. I think we probably both got something to contribute. I'll let Karan go first.
I think we probably stress more about these granular detail of things, and the stress likely contributes to more worsening of the health outcomes than actually doing the thing. And regarding your point about coffee first thing in the morning, I know lots of podcasters and influencers might talk about that. There is zero evidence that the timing of your morning coffee makes any difference to your adenosine system or anything like that at all, or cortisol. If someone's using cortisol willy-nilly, forget everything they're saying, because ultimately, if you actually look at the evidence, number one, there's nothing to suggest that the timing of your coffee matters, except if you have it too close to bedtime, and it can impact your sleep. And number two, coffee is made from fermented beans. It's rich in fibers, it's fermented, it's got antioxidants. So there's no issue with coffee or the timing, really.
So there's the science behind the timing of the coffee, and the question on the plant milks, which I can probably delve into for you there. Plant milks are not created to be anything other than an option for people that can't have cow's milk and want to reduce cow's milk. That's why they're there. And all these ingredients that you see that you may think, oh, I don't know what that means. Why has it got this oil in it? A lot of the time, like the word ascorbic acid means vitamin C. So it can be a bit daunting, but they're just simply fortifying an option to get the nutrition that you're not getting by not having cow's milk. Now, there's options for people that don't want to have the fortification by picking an organic milk that doesn't have a carrier. But then will it froth in the same way? This is food science now. When you add different things to the milks, you get the texture, you get the creaminess. And I've actually got a page on that in the new book, a whole double spread on plant milks, because I get so many questions about every single type of milk out there. But they're not inherently bad. And with regards to a glucose spike, well, oats are a carbohydrate. You're just having oats and water in a drink. Of course, it's going to spike glucose or cause a bit of a release of sugars. But if you pair it in a breakfast dish that has fats, that has the fiber, it's going to slow the release of those sugars a bit. So rapeseed oil, just so everyone knows, is actually the cold-pressed rapeseed oil in studies came out with very similar differences to extra virgin olive oil. So they're on a par nutritionally. And there seems to be a whole fear-mongering around that. And I got really trolled when I last spoke about that with Fern on her podcast. So for some reason, it's a very contentious, emotive subject. But I hope between us that's answered those questions. I'm hoping I've got time for one more before we move on to fact or fiction round. Anyone brave enough to go? Yep, over here.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for such an engaging conversation. Vitamins, supplements, and then plus 40s. It's like, yeah, your muscles are degenerating. Must do this and that. Must go to the gym. Must take care of your nervous system because also, you might be perimenopausal. Like, how do you balance that all, first of all? I've been a gym goer for a really long time, yoga, dance, and I just can't do it all anymore. But then you're told your muscles are degenerating. So in terms of fitness and training, how do you change your approach to it? And then do you take supplements or do you not? Or do you try and get it from your food?
Yeah.
Next, I go through flows of periods where I'm suddenly looking at supplements again. And then biohacking is a thing.
Oh, okay. So I will let Karan start with the need for supplements from middle life and onwards, and then perhaps biohacking. Should we start with those two?
So I think if you look at science-based, evidence-based supplements, which have a lot of research behind them, there are very few. And I'm talking about for a normal population to keep you healthy, things like omega-3, vitamin D, and creatine. Okay, beyond this, there's very few supplements that make sense unless you are in a specific cohort which has a medical indication. So you're perinatal, you need folic acid, B12, or you have a bowel condition and you need X, Y, Z. You have a certain disease which makes you nutrient deficient, you need this, then you need to supplement those things for medical reasons. For a normal physiological population, the three things I mentioned is probably the only science-based things that we can say. Beyond that, things like collagen, spirulina, X, Y, Z, it's just nonsense. There's people who are just trying to make their bank balance bigger at your own expense. And, going on later in life and training, yes, I think the inevitable thing about aging is that we'll lose muscle mass as we grow older. Our bodies, not to be a bit grim, but our bodies are on a long march towards death. And we can just prevent or delay the degeneration. That's
Happy
it.
place,
Happy
everybody.
place, yeah. the realist place, first of all, you know. I think that's what we need to acknowledge. So going to the gym to, you know, keep the muscle mass that we have as high as we can for as long as we can is what we're trying to do. So I think the supplements for most people is just papering over the cracks, which you can get most of it from food. And I think, granted, Rhiannon will probably agree, there is some socioeconomic factors at play here. So there may be people who can't afford this wide range of food all the time to sustain that habit. Maybe in select cases, supplements may be a useful adjunct, but for a normal population, probably not.
No, I think that answered it perfectly. The people are preying on our vulnerability. They're preying on our anxiety. You know, we all want to do what's best for us. God, I would love to be told if I take this collagen powder every day, I'm not going to develop an age in the same way that I know I inevitably will. If it were that simple, I would be buying it too, I assure you. I mean, I would be investing in it. I would have a whole range. But no, like Karan said, unless you're vegan, that's another exception. You need B12 and things. There are few reasons where supplements will ever replace the food that you eat in a balanced diet. There's such a small amount. Right, we're going to move on to our fact or fiction rounds. I'm going to put Karan on the spot now, and I'm very excited to do this. Are you ready?
Go on then.
Let's do it. Question 1. You've got to answer it really fast, fact or fiction, understanding there's some room for nuance.
Just a word.
Just a word, fact or fiction, unless you need to expand, which is fine.
Okay.
Quickly. No pressure. Okay. Right. CBD oil is an effective treatment for anxiety and pain relief.
Fiction, but growing evidence and research about the effects of CBD for a number of things.
Oh, I like that. White spots on your nails are a result of a calcium deficiency.
Fiction with an asterisk. There can be a number of things which causes changes to your nails, but usually the reason you have a white spot on your nail is not because the mum's tale of calcium deficiency. It's because you've had some trauma to your nail, physical trauma. You've slammed it somewhere or knocked it somewhere a number of weeks ago, and your nail bed is growing. The nail matrix is growing from the bottom up, and then you see a white spot, probably 6 weeks or so from your original injury.
Perfect. I was always told that as a kid as well. Surgeons sometimes put seaweed into your body at the end of surgery.
Seaweed?
Yeah, I know.
Where am I sourcing this seaweed from? I'll start if you guys want that.
Tell me. I'll buy the algae.
Yeah. Fiction, but we do put you in weird positions. For easy access, obviously.
Oh, just wait for the next one. Number 4, bee pollen can increase breast size. And I kid you not, I saw that on a TikTok video and was like, what is going on?
Fiction, breast size is detected by hormones, which have nothing to do with bee pollen.
Lemon juice is an effective treatment for acid reflux.
Fiction as well. Lemon juice is obviously acidic, and if you've got acid reflux, you've got too much acid going from your stomach into your upper esophagus, so lemon juice would make it worse.
Men orgasm more than women.
It's probably a fact.
We've done that one. Women feel colder than men.
Got a lot of orgasm chat for this festival. Men feel colder than men.
No, women feel colder than men. Did I say that?
No, I got it wrong. Probably fact. I think there's a number of factors, from hormonal factors, which can also influence the sort of the pain sensitivity, and temperature is a type of pain sensation. So, yeah.
Ice baths, and I'm glad we're touching on this, are an effective treatment for anxiety.
So I think we can say fact/fiction. So ice baths, I think their benefits for physiology can be overstated. For physiology. Not saying it doesn't work for people's mental health and clarity, it can, but I don't think we can say ice baths are a panacea for all types of anxiety or mental health.
Do I need to get one in my garden like all these influencers? No, okay, fine. No. Don't want to do that.
You can buy my upcoming range of probiotic supplements.
Oh, there we go. Heard it here first. Aspartame sweetener causes cancer.
Fiction. I think the public are sometimes misled about the different cancer or carcinogen classifications. The studies which show that aspartame can cause cancer was done at supraphysiological doses, like 1,000 times more than you'd get from drinking even 12 cans of Coke, and it was done in animal studies. So no, it doesn't cause cancer.
Exactly. And in fact, one of the few foods that actually is linked to that in class 1 is red and processed meat, right? So the sweeteners are not the thing. Right. Exposing your genitals to direct sunlight boosts your energy levels.
Yeah, it depends if you're running away from someone at the time. I think no. So there's a reason why it's called the area where the sun don't shine. Okay. The skin there is very thin, so it's actually at higher risk of sensitivity and burns. And if you get a melanoma down there, who's going to check it for you until it's too late?
Brilliant. That wraps up the fact or fiction round. So concise. That was fantastic. Now, we always wrap up every Food for Thought podcast with a take-home message, a literal food for thought. And I think I'll start today by just reminding everybody the importance of putting your detective hat on. I can honestly say that you're not alone and that all of us are being exposed to the same cinematic podcasts that are making things sound like we have to buy this supplement and that we have to do this for our health. And if we're not, that this is really detrimental. The online world right now is in a bit of a crisis. Misinformation has never been so bad. So please, please, please check the sources of information that you're going to. And of course, if you want more information, you can check out Karan's book. And you can check out my book, and I'm going to be around book signing. Karan, have you done some here for people?
I'm going to leave soon, but I'm happy if you've got a book or whatever, I'll sign it, so as long as you can catch me.
And I'd love to have a take-home message from you before you run off the stage.
I think what we've known about health in broad terms hasn't really changed much in decades. You know, eat a plentiful diet, sleep more or sleep as well as you can, move more. There's some foundations which haven't changed, and people like to talk about polarizing or controversial things to make you feel that you need to buy something or do something that you're missing out on. And really, it's simple in terms of stuff that we can do for free at home, from eating foods which have natural probiotics in them to maybe just drinking coffee, you know, not so close to bedtime, to prioritizing certain things in our life. So I think less is more when it comes to, you know, focusing on health. And you definitely don't need to buy something that a random influencer tells you to do.
Absolutely. Karan, thank you so, so much for coming on Food for Thought.
Thank you very much.